Hello, everybody. For the last 10 years, I have been completing an annual review. Typically, these written responses are only read by my supervisor before they are distilled down to a few short paragraphs for everyone to read. This year, I noticed a different tone in my writing. It felt more like a letter to all of you. Peg Edera, who is still serving as my supervisor, noticed this as well. We decided to follow what appeared to be a leading to share this with all of you. This is long, but I hope it gives you a clear sense of the work I've done over the last year, while also looking into the future. Perhaps it is appropriate that this is the first time I've shared my unabridged review with you, considering this will be my 10th year. I am deeply committed to the work of being a released minister in service to this community. I am as excited as ever to keep pursuing God's calling for us. Through all the ups and downs of my faith journey, I am fascinated that I have never stopped pursuing the incredible power of compassion that exists at the heart of the life and teachings of Jesus. All of you have been a part of that pursuit. Thank you. Here is my review, aka my love letter to the community at West Hills. Youth program. We made a switch this year to having both middle school and high school youth group meeting every week. When we were meeting in person before COVID-19, the middle school group would meet every Thursday from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and high school would follow immediately after from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The increase in our meeting frequency has been a great move. The middle school group has benefited from an influx of new attendees that have been invited by longtime attenders. The high school group is smaller, but has a more intimate feel. Many in this group note the importance of weekly gatherings as a way to check in with each other's mental health. On Sunday mornings, we now consistently see 3 to 5 teens showing up. This is because we started creating time after the message is completed for our teens to gather. I often join them for this, and we typically check in about the message, and I do my best to adapt the queries to make them relevant for their lives. I really love that we've started doing this. The youth group continues to meet weekly, except now on Zoom. There was more consistent participation in Zoom youth group gatherings prior to distance learning starting up. Teens are noting screen fatigue by the time youth group begins. The high school group in particular has struggled to maintain consistent attendance when meeting via Zoom. The children's program. We made a big change at the beginning of this year. We actually reduced the number of volunteers working in the Godly Play program, which seems a bit wild. We achieved this by shifting Kelly Boylan from the nursery to the permanent doorkeeper position for the Godly Play program. We had Julie Payton, Cindy Stottle, and Carol Minkus-Creswell step in as a regular rotation of storytellers, with Susan Hathaway filling in from time to time. I think this change has made it easier to maintain the Godly Play schedule, and we are able to lean on Kelly's expertise in working with neurodiversity amongst children. The preschool program continues to be a consistent and loving space for children transitioning out of the nursery. The teachers each bring their own crafts and project ideas to the group. We continue to see alarmingly low numbers of children and young families at West Hills. Early in 2020, I led a community-wide conversation looking into this issue. This conversation was well attended, and the ideas explored revealed the complexity of maintaining the culture of a faith community that welcomes and sustains engagement with young families. In my opinion, I think that this conversation is vital for the future of West Hills Friends. Examining and making cultural changes at West Hills to meet the evolving needs of families in our city in particular will be crucial for us to be able to attract and maintain this demographic. Newcomers. Over the last year, I have hosted a few newcomer gatherings. Attendance at these meetings is unpredictable, but whenever folks make it, I continue to learn more about welcoming new folks at West Hills. One revelation that was particularly eye-opening was a newcomer noting their difficulty in finding the restrooms. It reminded me how simple some of the needs of our newcomers are. After that meeting, I purchased a book that walked through some of the key points in welcoming new folks. It was from this reading that I discerned some areas that we could work on. Our parking situation may be confusing for new folks, especially if they do not know that they can park in the school spots across the street. If someone drives through our parking lot and does not see a spot in the lot, or on the street behind the meeting house, they may just leave entirely, and we would never know that they even tried. So we decided to have an outdoor greeter who can assist folks in finding parking while also helping friends with accessibility needs into the building. We have heard from many people that this was a great move. Some of our newer folks have talked about the difficulty of getting plugged in at West Hills. Our tight-knit community is obviously a huge asset, but it can sometimes feel a little too tight for folks looking to get in. Perhaps we can spend some time together practicing ways of engaging newer folks in our community and making sure they feel included. Social media and our online presence. Believe it or not, West Hills continues to be one of the few Quaker meetings in the States that have a consistent online presence. Uploading first words and messages with permission from the speakers continues to be a ministry in of itself. Thankfully, Holly has been on top of that, and I really appreciate her work on this. I think it is always worth us exploring other ways for us to tell our story to people online. This is the place that new folks will engage with us first. Finding ways to utilize our public Facebook page, our Instagram account, our website, and our podcast feed so that it can give a fuller picture of who we are is good work for us to do. COVID-19. Obviously, the arrival of COVID-19 has drastically changed the way we gather as a community. Thankfully, we were already experimenting with Zoom for smaller gatherings long before the virus. For this reason, I think our transition to worshiping utilizing Zoom felt fairly smooth. Our meetings for worship consistently see 50 to 80 folks in attendance on Zoom, and most notably include friends who haven't been able to worship with us for some time because of medical issues or physical distance. I sense that our community feels closer in some aspects because we are maintaining some connection while we are apart. Some friends have noted, though, that worshiping via Zoom doesn't meet some of their core needs, while others have said they may actually prefer worshiping online. I hope to work with the task forces that are forming to be sure that we are prepared to help the community navigate the uncertainty ahead of us. Pastoral. One of the favorite parts of my job is meeting with people one-on-one. With each passing year at West Hills, I am able to see more clearly my role in this. The advantage of having two released ministers is that we are able to meet the various needs of those seeking out one-on-one care, both in regards to time and energy, and accounting for the various preferences of pastoral style, personality, and gender. In my role working with our young people, the work of checking in one-on-one often happens using various social media platforms, in addition to meeting in person, while following our abuse prevention policies. Staying in connection with our young people is a vital part in maintaining their sense of connection with their faith community. I am also thankful for close relationships with other released ministers here in the Pacific Northwest. This spring, Mike Huber, acting as a co-clerk of Sierra Cascades' yearly meeting of friends, started a weekly Zoom meeting with pastors of member meetings of Sierra Cascades. Having these weekly 90-minute meetings to discuss the work of being released ministers has been incredibly encouraging and supportive to me. Collaborating with other Quaker meetings is work I feel is important, and I am lucky to be deepening my relationship with those individuals. This last year, we also experimented with a new schedule of delivering prepared messages. Martha would provide messages on the first and third Sundays of the month, and I would cover the second. We would leave the fourth and fifth Sundays open to whoever had a leading. And even with this schedule, this rough schedule that we had, Martha and I were clear that if someone in our meeting had a leading to bring a message, we would make way for that leading. So we didn't hold on to that schedule too tightly. This new schedule meant that this was the first time in my 10 years at West Hills where I was consistently preparing and delivering prepared messages. This, as it turns out, ended up being one of the most valuable parts of my entire year. I discovered an even deeper passion for listening, reading, researching, and studying, alongside discernment about what needs to be said in our meetings. I discovered just how much I love writing, and it has been a wonderful thing to practice. Once Martha moved on from her position as interim, it was clear we now had a few more slots to fill in the schedule for messages. I have been giving more messages since her departure, and I still find everything I said above, when I was writing just once a month, to be true. I also want to take a moment to thank Holly Dines, who has stepped into her role at West Hills so beautifully and with so much love and care for us. As her colleague, I must say that the work we do together is exciting, and it creates space for me to more fully lean into my various roles at West Hills. Having Holly navigating many of the administrative tasks at West Hills is an incredible blessing to me and all of us. I am so thankful for her. Charm. The committee to hire an additional released minister. I volunteered to be present for interviews with candidates for the additional released minister position, and subsequent follow-up meetings to debrief and discern about next steps with candidates. I am so thankful for all the members of Charm. The time and energy committed to this work is remarkable, and I am deeply appreciative of all they have sacrificed to be part of this process. I know this because I am aware of my own energy levels following Charm meetings. Part of the energy drain that comes from this work is holding the complexity of our community in the light next to a person we are calling to walk alongside us. West Hills is a uniquely beautiful community with 30 years of history. And we ventured through this process, this last year, we often had deep conversations about our history, who we are now, and what we hope for in the future. Figuring out how individuals fit into this narrative is challenging work. I sense deep care for our meeting and a longing to see us thrive into this next chapter of our story. While it was and still is exhausting work, I see the conversations we have had as important and insightful. Experiments. Honestly, part of my work annually seems to be weekly adjustments. Having a colleague like Martha to meet with on a weekly basis meant that we could take time to bounce questions like, what are you noticing in our community right now, and how might we come alongside folks who have expressed interest or desires for various projects in our community? I actually love the dynamic nature of my work. While there are certainly routines and core tasks that happen each week, it is also a shifting landscape that invites me into weekly reflection and discernment about what work our community needs help doing. For example, during our Garden of Possibilities conversations, it was clear folks were looking for more midweek opportunities to gather, especially times to sit in silence for longer stretches. And Martha and I talked about what this might look like and decided to experiment with weekly morning meditation times in the late spring, summer of 2019. These were well attended throughout the few months we did them, and we even experimented with an evening meditation time as well. Part of this work is also paying attention to what is happening in the world. When rumors of war were being kicked around with Iran, we put together a quick vigil for peace that was attended by both West Hills Friends folks and folks in our neighborhood. Going off script a little bit, I want to insert that obviously what's going on in our world right now has also been an example of this. As our community responds to the upheaval in our country as a result of the murder of George Floyd, vigils are being scheduled and meetings are being scheduled for how we at West Hills can respond. And so this is another example of paying attention to what's going on in the world and responding in the moment. For a few months, we also played around with a new podcast offering called Quaker Poets Read, which gathered the voices of various Quaker poets throughout the country, reading their own works of poetry. The youth also experimented with their own podcast idea of initiating cross-generational conversations with folks at West Hills. One of the most helpful insights Mike shared with me when we were still working together was a metaphor about rocket launches. He said that in order to get a rocket off the ground and into orbit, it requires a ridiculous amount of fuel and energy. And I looked it up. A rocket booster consumes 11,000 pounds of fuel per second during a takeoff. That is 2 million times more than the average car uses to operate per second. But once a shuttle is in orbit, it can turn its solar panels toward the sun and enjoy a much more leisurely, relaxed pace. The parallels are likely obvious now, but getting things off the ground require a whole lot more energy than things that are already in orbit. So, when we try these experimental things, it is helpful to notice when things get into orbit and when they don't. Also, some of these experiments might not need to live on past the time that they were tried. These things can be seasonal. But still, I think it is important that I keep investing time and energy in these new things, even if they don't stick. We learn and grow together with everything we try to do. Some closing observations. Y'all know me. I love vulnerability. It is the only way I really know how to operate. It is not really about, it's really not about being brutally honest, like that form of vulnerability, because another part of me is an empath who really struggles in conflict. So brutal honesty is not really my forte. It is more like, here is what I'm experiencing, and the only way for me to process it all is to share it. This year had many challenges for me and my family, alongside incredible blessings and maybe even miracles. Now that we have been here for 10 years, I think it is even more of an appropriate time to stand back and say, wow. The core reality of this is that Beth and I have been doing our best to pursue a calling and a passion and a dream to make a life here in the Pacific Northwest. There were times this year we wondered if we were going to be able to keep doing it. That's real. The realities of being 3,000 miles away from our families on the East Coast, alongside the ever-rising cost of living in the city of Portland, meant that we really wrestled with what to do. Then last summer, we took a family trip to Bend. And while our kids played in a cold mountain lake, and Beth and I stared at the Three Sisters Mountains, we looked at each other and said, we can't give up on this. Even though we didn't name it as such, this felt like a big recommitment to our lives and work here in Portland and the Pacific Northwest. We decided to double down and make that commitment all the more solid by pursuing an often wacky home buying process. This meant standing outside the Expo Center at 3 a.m. in the freezing cold to receive a $25,000 grant for down payment assistance and applying for every possible program for first-time home buyers in our income bracket. There were many miracles along this way. Sometimes we didn't know they were even happening, and we emerged, somewhat like Jonah being spit from the mouth of the whale, into our new home in outer southeast Portland in February of this year. That whole process seemed to be a sign of the times for Beth and I. Dramatic highs and dramatic lows. With COVID-19, the financial health of our family seems to be in a precarious spot. Beth works at a Montessori school, and the impacts of the virus might shift things fundamentally for her employment in the fall. That uncertainty wears on us heavily these days. Ultimately, though, I want to say thank you to all of you at West Hills. Now that I am able to celebrate a decade with you, I think it is totally appropriate to take a bit more time to reflect on this whole wonderful experience. Thank you for all the ways you have tangibly supported me and my family over the years. And thank you for all the unknown ways you have supported us, the prayers uttered, the advocacy that I never knew you gave us, and so on. Thank you so much. I love my job as much, if not more, than I did 10 years ago. I could not possibly account for all the lessons I've learned over these years. I know I have grown and changed. I take that same posture of humble listening and care into my future with West Hills. I know we are in a delicate time as a meeting. Oftentimes, these threshold moments feel more anxiety-inducing the closer you get to the threshold. I trust that on the other side of the threshold will be something we will want to savor. I love all of you. Thank you for making it this far and listening to me. I can't wait to see what the future holds for us. Blessings to you. Love, love, love.